And I'm trying to make it as interesting as possible without making it a pedagogy exercise in the morning today. As the President was saying, on a Sunday morning, I don't want to make you so tired. And in fact, I'm surprised. I'm asked to speak 45 minutes. I won't bother you. Don't really. I'll cut it much shorter. But then there are some small things that I think we have all forgotten as we go along. It's possibly because we take things for granted. Because we have our own lives, we take our lives through, and then we forget the basic principles that we are known for. So a democracy is nothing but the people, the sovereign. In a democracy, there is no other sovereign than the people. It's called the popular sovereign. Earlier, we used to have a sovereign which we would call the kings and all that, and the king would then, issue the dictates and the directives and the edicts and all that. But that kalam, our kalam marikkan, it is now, we are completely in a place where each of us are the sovereign. This is something which the citizens forget, and something which the citizens, unfortunately, tend not to be aware at all. Imagine every one of us, not only the people sitting here, I know this is a very august gathering, but even the person on the street who sleeps on the street in the night, he is the sovereign. He is the sovereign who controls each other in the democracy. If you understand that basic principle, everything that we say in court, all the good things that you said about me, become absolutely normal and very, very unremarkable. You will understand that judges don't do anything very remarkable except we follow the Constitution. For that, we must know what a Constitution is also. I'm glad in the last few years, the concept of the Constitution has become very, very relevant now. It is something that is being spoken about very, very easily and routinely in almost all the functions that I go. The Constitution, as I always say, and this is not something I start saying, it is something which the world has recognized. Not only that of India, but any other country in the world, the Constitution is the highest law. It is a grand norm, as they say. As Professor H.L.A. Hart used to say, it's the law under which every other law requires to be tested. So if you understand the Constitution to be the paramount law of our nation, and understand that we don't have a sovereign except the popular sovereign, which are every one of us. Please understand that the Constitution then makes it very, very clear that the power vests in us, we the people of India. So when the power is vested in us and we are the sovereign, and every law has to be tested from the standpoint of the Constitution, the view of the people, the voice of the people becomes paramount. This is where the press steps in. How can a citizen make their noise, make their voice felt? We are a nation of a large number of people. We are perhaps the most populous nation in the world already. We have perhaps now overtaken China, perhaps not officially, but unofficially we know that we have done that. It is not possible for each of us to have our voice heard. It is only a very few, perhaps marginally few people who can have their voices heard directly. It is our voice which should be the reflection of the press. It's a concept of dialogue between the people and the persons whom you have entrusted to rule, which is a cornerstone of a vibrant press. It's a concept of dialogue. It is a concept of communication. It is a voice of the people that the press should carry, and that is what our press, I am proud to say this, our press has been the foremost in doing that. I know that there are criticisms, there are reports about various facets. I don't want to go into the details and create any controversy today. But the fact remains that whatever be the index that our press may gather in the international watchdog statistics, the fact remains that our press has been one of the most vibrant, in spite of all the inhibitions they have continuously been forced to face. And we have done a remarkable job, particularly in Kerala. We have done a very, very remarkable job. So when you reflect the people's voice, you become the carrier of the conscience of the nation. And this is what the press has been doing also. When you have an interaction, when you have a dialogue, you initiate a dialogue. Every news that you carry, every information that you report, please understand that you are actually creating a dialogue. And the importance of dialogue in a democracy can never be understatement. Imagine a situation where the press is banned. Imagine a situation where the press is unable to function. Imagine a situation where the press is completely quarantined. Just imagine. It will be a case where we have no idea what we want. We have no idea, the executive has no idea what they have to give. This will give rise to revolts and revolutions. If you see the Jasmine Revolution in Tunisia, 2010 or so, see how that developed actually. It's because the people could not reflect their views. The moment there is a very active dialogue, a very a healthy dialogue between the sovereign and the persons whom we have elected to rule, that takes care of all the friction also. This is why it is very important to understand what we are. We are a democracy governed by the rule of law. We are not governed by an individual. We are governed by the rule of law. And which is the law that governs us? It is a constitution that governs us. Nothing else governs us. No individual can govern us. No institution can govern us. It is a constitution that governs you. You go by the constitutional concepts. When we talk about the conscience, when we talk about morality, when we talk about decency, I'll come to it, I'll tell you why I'm saying all this. Please understand, we are not talking about an individual morality or an individual conscience or an individual sense of decency. We are talking about the constitutional concepts. It's a constitutional morality we are talking about. It's a constitutional conscience that we are talking about. There is a lot of difference in the words that I'm using. An ordinary conscience is a subjective one. When I say, I have acted as per my conscience, this is something which I say in many of my speeches also. Whenever I step down, whenever I retire, which I'll have to do in about 8 years or so from now, if you ask me whether I've done my job well, and if I'm able to say that I have acted as per the constitutional conscience and directives, then I have done a good job. But if I am to say that I've acted as per my conscience, possibly I have failed in my duties as a judge. So this is the importance of a constitution. It is a rule of law, as they call it the Rest Act. It's the rule of law. Everybody is under the same law, and that law is the constitution. And therefore, when a legislature makes a law, that law will also have to be tested on the touchstone of the constitution. If that law fails from the constitutional preamble and the constitutional imperatives, that law will have to be struck down by somebody like me who is sitting in the High Court or the Supreme Court. It has to be done. But then what is the cornerstone of the constitution that we have today? It is a division of the powers into three. Press is never stated there, but I'll tell you how important it is. Now we have the legislature which makes the law. We have the executive that executes the law and implements it. And we have the judiciary that keeps an eye on the laws and the actions to verify whether they come within the constitution. You know, the word freedom of press is never used in the constitution. It's brought in judicially through orders and judgments, far-reaching judgments, Sakal Papers, Kenneth Coleman, Romila Thapar, all those judgments bring in the freedom of press within the fundamental rights of a freedom of conscience, of expression and speech. Now, when this freedom of speech is a fundamental right, obviously freedom of press, your right to propagate, your right to disseminate information becomes also fundamental. It is not your fundamental right that we are talking about. It is a fundamental right of the persons, of the individuals, of the citizens of this great nation, which you are the agent of. You hold them in trust. We hold every person in trust who are given the powers under the various limbs of the Constitution. I remember when we speak about the freedom of press and all that, the importance, you have possibly heard of the phrase which is often used, the fourth estate. I don't know whether you have really thought of it. What is really a fourth estate? Because we don't have estates in a place like India. You know, this was something that was used in the mid modern ages of the European systems. They used to talk about three estates of the realms. They were the clergy, the nobility, and the commoner. So I remember this is a quote that is often ascribed to Edwin Burke. He is a British legislator par excellence. He said there are three estates in this parliament: the clergy, the commoner, and the nobility. Then he said, but the most powerful of the estate sits on the visitors' gallery. He was talking to the press. That is how the word the fourth estate came in. And this particular quotation of Burke was reflected in a subsequent book called The Heroes and Hero Worship or something. I may be wrong with the specifics. Heroes and Hero Worship or something. That is written by, I'm not sure. Who wrote it? Roscoe or somebody. So he said this is what Burke told about the fourth estate. Now when you come to the concepts, you import those concepts into a democracy like India, we call them the fourth pillar. That's because we constitutionally understand that the power of the sovereign, which is the power of the social, the popular sovereign, power of the people, are divided into the three pillars: legislature, executive, and the judiciary. But no stool with three legs would be that stable. We want the fourth pillar. We want the fourth stand. And that leg, and the most important of the stabilizing leg, is a press. It is that leg which stabilizes the entire system. The three legs that you find would possibly be very unstable in occasions. But you add the fourth leg to it, which is a press to it, it becomes a stability factor. And this is the importance of press, something which we don't really recognize much. The stability of a nation like India, which is the most populous, is dependent upon the press. And therefore, that's why I started by saying, you ask me how important is a press to democracy. The press itself is democracy, and therefore that question makes really no sense at all. So when we are talking about the separation of powers, we understand that each of us have delimited powers and delimited responsibilities to discharge when we do our duties. As a judge, I know there are criticism about judges, and I carry it also. I know that some of you say that also. They say that this is judicial activism. You are, straying beyond the powers that are given to you. How are you expected to trench into the powers of the executive? But then in India, in the Indian context, when we have an article like Article 226, I don't know if my voice is disturbing her. And I apologize for that. I think she must have been sleeping well. No, don't bother. I was just joking. That's okay. So, I'm so sorry, madam. That's possibly a future Prime Minister walking. And I was greeted by lovely two young children, the next generation. I'm so glad that they are all here. They may not understand what we are saying today, but they will understand this as the years go by. We have to protect the system so badly these days. So as I was saying, when the legislator legislates, they are expected to come or remain within certain parameters. When the executive acts, they are expected to remain within certain delineated responsibilities. And when the judiciary is functioning, we are expected to be within certain traditions, precedents, and barriers. Now, the problem is that sometimes when we work within our delimited, barricaded systems, we don't understand whether we are doing it right or wrong. I'll start with the judiciary itself, because I am a reflection of that particular system more than any other. See, when I'm in court and I do my job, when I'm in my chambers and I do my work, the problem is I really do not know what the people tell me or what the people want from me. I have no idea at all. I'm sitting in isolation, and our job, as they call it, is perhaps more defined by the words splendid isolation. We are expected to be like that. We are expected not to be too very concerned about public and things like that. But I don't believe that. So therefore, I know whether I'm doing it right or wrong when I see the way the press reports about my observations and my orders. Now, what happens in court? I do not know how many of you have really come to a real court. We are not talking about a court that you see in a movie, which is completely different from what really is. You come to a real court, you understand that there is a lot of give and take, particularly from judges who have been lawyers earlier. I have been like that. I've been a judge only for 6.5 years, but I was a lawyer for 25.5 years. So the lawyering in you never dies. Your tendency to argue never goes away, really speaking, particularly if you love that profession which you have come from, and I do that. So this is a complete give and take in the court. We ask questions, we get answers. There's a lot of things happening in court, and it is very spontaneous and very quotidian. Now, earlier, we have that open court system. Everybody is supposed to come to the court and hear what we are doing, particularly litigants. But it is not possible. Physically, it is not possible for all litigants to come to the court and hear what we are doing. Now we have a system of hybrid system that is all thanks to COVID. Sometimes bad things create good things also. COVID is one of the worst things we have seen, but it has now given rise to a lot of new developments. So what we now see is a hybrid system where you can watch the court proceedings online and offline. You can be inside the court is open now, there are no COVID restrictions, hardly any. But then you can see me sitting or see any judge sitting and view the proceedings in a hybrid motion. Now this creates a lot of responsibility and a lot of openness. This really makes it much more difficult for us to do what we think is right, but which is not constitutionally permitted. There is a complete eye of the press and the people on us. And this is where the press is important as far as I'm concerned. It tells me whether I'm doing my job right or wrong. It tells me whether I'm within my powers and within my parameters. It really is an eye-opener, because otherwise, when you are within your system, the system simply tells you that you are the best. It is something that is so insincere that you can never rely upon it. You have to rely upon the word of the views of the people, which is something which, sitting in the judiciary, I can hardly get otherwise. I have to rely on the reports that I get. I don't read newspapers too much these days, because you know what happens when we are expected to be aloof to the extent possible. But then we get a lot of information through other sources, especially the social media, to which also I'll come along as I go along. So this is the importance of a press as far as a judge is concerned. We have to be told that, look, you are wrong. You are doing something which the people don't like, whether it is right or wrong. This is why when your president was speaking, he talked about a particular speech of mine where I said there is a difference between law and justice. Sometimes law does not create full justice. We may have to mold our actions. That doesn't go with my sisters who are working in the district judiciary. But when you come to the High Court and the Supreme Court, where we are dealing with Articles 226 and Article 32, we get a lot of play in our hands. We get a lot of power. Their discretion is vested. So sometimes we mold the law in such a manner to produce justice in the given circumstances. It's a concept of complete justice. So this is where there is a lot of controversy also. This is where the concept of judicial activism is also thrown on us. I know a particular a report that I got from a particular journalist. I don't remember who he was. He is supposed to have said somewhere that if this man wants to speak like this, welcome to the social media. It was a criticism against me. And he said, if you this is the way you speak in court and this is the way you make observations, then don't do that in court, come to the social media. That's a fair criticism. I have no problem there. But then when you are in court, people who have come to the court understand. This is not done deliberately. Contextually we speak. And we speak in retort or response to a particular input that is given to us. So this is an open give and take system that we have in the judiciary, but then we really do not know the pulse of the people. I rely on the press for that, and I always say our orders and judgments are worthless until the people know it. How does the people know? Suppose tomorrow the press boycotts the judiciary and decides not to report anything about the judiciary. Our orders will remain only in our reporting journals, the KLT, or the KLJ and those things. No person in the world will know. All the judgments that was talked about by in my account, they are all judgments that got public attention because of the press. This is the importance of press. And therefore, when the public opinion is aroused, we understand that we are beyond law or within powers or within the limits. This is the most felicitous action that the press has as far as the judiciary is concerned. It is no different from legislature. It is no different as far as executive is concerned. I'll just ask you one thing. Have you ever heard of a phrase, an independent executive? You have all heard of independent judiciary, independent media, but have you heard of an independent executive? Because we are expected to be independent of the executive. This is why, I'll tell you why. Every power of the sovereign, as I was saying earlier, I'm restating it. It's the power of the people. Every power of the sovereign, this popular sovereign or the people, as we call it, is vested in the executive. We have a representative kind of a democracy where we elect our representatives. We send them to the legislature. They are the lawmaking body. They have to make laws in consonance with the Constitution. From there, we create the executive. So it's our own representatives who are there to ensure that they do what we want them to do. Now here is a concept of the larger concept of justice. What really is a concept of the substantial justice that we are talking about. Basically, in a very, very simplified, easy manner of speaking, justice is actually giving every person his or her due. Everybody requires something or the other constantly in your life. How we make it available to each of them, and we understand that there is a lot of conflict between the requests that are made. Two citizens may make opposing concepts, opposing requests, and we are expected to give both of them what is due to them. So what is important is not the request, is not what your desire is. What is important is what is due to you. And that is where the principles of justice takes it. It is not a justice as far as judiciary is concerned. The concept of justice goes with the legislature as well as the executive. So here is where the judiciary tells the legislature what the people want. If a law is proposed and it is anti-people, as the press would report it perhaps, you will see that there will be a relook at it. The legislature would have no other option but to think twice before making it a law and before enforcing it at least. The executive, it is far worse because they are more directly responsible and they are so accountable to the people that every action of theirs would be tested constantly, every day, not only by the press but by the judiciary also. But then, that's a people's voice that have to reach the executive. Otherwise, what happens is, it is shrouded in secrecy, and believe me, every system wants secrecy. It is the easiest way to function without accountability. Suppose I am allowed to do what I am doing in complete secrecy without anybody knowing what I am doing. I would be happy with that because my powers become unlimited. As they always say, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In a democracy, this is absolutely vital that we don't allow either power or absolute power. And we have to ensure that it is circumscribed by the will of the people. And it is a will of the people which is now shown to them by the press. And this is the importance of press. Unless we tell them, we tell the executive, I am also a common man. I may also have my predilections and my desires. But I can tell my executive only through the press these days. If I send them a representation, it will most likely be confined to some file or worse, into the dustbin. But if I take it through the press, you know the interventions that have been done by the press in the last few years, every one of them were taken seriously. When there is an issue that is projected by the press on a regular basis or on a committed basis, you see the results are very, very starkly. You report that a person is unwell, he wants attention because he does not have the resources to go through a surgery or whatever. You see the way the people react. Immediately people react, immediately that cause is taken care of, and that is the power of the press. Imagine 2018 when the floods came. We had no idea how to communicate with people. It was a press that stood with us. Because I know it personally because I was in the forefront of the High Court. We were trying to do a small thing that we could do. It was always the information that I got from very good friends of the press, well-meaning people who had no care for their life. They were in the forefront, they would go to the site, they would be within the house which is submerged and give us information. It is that information which carried us those days. Very, very vital, very, very important. I in fact went to Alleppey, invited by a father who is running a small radio station. I believe it is called Radio Naithal. It is that radio that galvanized the fishermen when the floods came. It took him only maybe a half an hour or 1 hour for that information to go through. And this is where, when you talk about democracy and talk about the separation of powers, the fourth pillar is so important. It is also where it is so important to understand that the rule of law is paramount. People understand the rule of law is paramount only when the press tells them. This is the real importance of the concept of press. And therefore, we cannot imagine a democracy without press. We cannot imagine a system in which press is not allowed to function freely. But then, as we were speaking earlier, there are several factors that are now being ascribed against the press also. I'm aware of it fully. You know, there could be a philosophical intervention. There could be intervention by the state or by institutions to stop you from functioning freely. It could be by, oppressive taxation. It could be by freezing your assets. It could be by stepping in means which would make it difficult for you to function. Therefore, you are the watchdogs. You are more importantly the watchdogs, and therefore your responsibility is also much more than perhaps the other three pillars. Your responsibility to be fair, impartial, and completely independent is, in my view, even more vital and important than the judiciary being independent. Because it is only if the press is independent can any other system be independent. Otherwise, no. If the press is not independent and they are forced to toe a particular line, believe me, whatever we do, even if we are able to do it in the judiciary, it would not be of that kind of an impact. This is where I always say that the orders of the courts are better implemented by the press than even by the executive or the police or whatever, executional systems. It is the public opinion that stands with us. If I make a judgment and if it is not liked by the public, I am fully aware that it can never be executed. But if I make a judgment and the public opinion stands with it, and it is in conformity with the constitutional conscience and the principles, certainly, I know, it does not require the executive to be told. No, we always talk about these contempt of court applications and all that. And I say this in court also. A judgment which is right, inherently right, and which is found to be right by the people are generally executed very easily. Because the executive knows that they cannot get away from a directive which is constitutionally valid and which the people also think is constitutionally valid. How does the executive know that? That's when you report it. But if you report it saying that that order is bad, that is an order which is wrong, and bring it to the notice of the judiciary, I'm telling you, it would be a case of review. It might happen also, and it has happened in the past also. So as I was saying, there is no freedom of press specifically enumerated in the Constitution. We derive that power from the preamble, as I said earlier, the freedom of expression, which is then completely couched in Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution of India. There are limitations, you are aware. Article 19(2) talks about various limitations: security of the state, friendly relations of India with other states, defamation, morality, public order, decency, and I don't know, I think one more. So these are the circumscribed, constitutionally circumscribed limits to the right of expression. And that applies to the press also. But then, please understand, even when the, I think it's called the Press Freedom Index, what is it called? Where India is supposed to be 150 or something this year. Reporters Sans Borders. There, even though India is ranked 150 in about 180 or whatever, please understand, in legal standards, we are still the best, which means there are no constraining factors from the judiciary or from the law as far as the press is concerned. It are the other attributes that has been taken note of while making the ranking. But look at that index. I was actually glad from the standpoint of a person belonging to the judiciary. The legal standards, India is found to be one of the finest. So this is where the press is able to function. And I don't think the Indian press is lesser than any other press in the world. I don't know why this criticism comes against the Indian press, because I have been watching international press also. We rank equal, if not more, than any other press systems in the world. India has had a very, very robust system. We have one of the finest reporters available. We have one of the finest editorial teams that we could put in place. And I don't think that criticism of Indian press being not world's class or whatever, if it is there, I don't think that is justified at all. We still have one of the finest press systems that we can think of, and the editorial team, as your president was saying, they are unheard, they are unseen, but they are the people who control the philosophy of the press, the philosophy of the particular institution at least. And kudos to them. And this is why I wanted this opportunity to come and talk to you, to make you understand how relevant and how important you are, and how important, therefore, it is for you to constantly get better. It is a constant case of getting and evolving better, adding value to yourself. You keep on holding your skills. You keep on getting better. It's an analysis that you do on a constant basis. You are students always. Every new news that you do, because after all, imagine if I am just asked to report the news as it is, all I require would be possibly a little bit of language, nothing else. But if you want to report news, the manner in which it is supposed to be heard, it requires a lot of analysis. And this is what the press is also doing these days. Very uncommon, perhaps in the last, before 10 years, before a decade, where you have all these debates that go on the televisions, and we have so many televisions happening. I think we have about 85,000 registered written press papers and journals, and about how many, 8,000 or so press channels in India. I think in Kerala alone we have about 10, 12 or 14 or whatever, or possibly more. And add to that is what is known as now the social media, the alternative media. This is a complete game changer. Because earlier, what you used to do with a lot of thought, yesterday in fact I met Joshua for another function and we were talking about this. Everything that we used to think so clearly, carefully and calibrated, I can sit in my room and do whatever I want, nobody bothers. I can sit confined to my space, close my office, close my bedroom, sit with a computer, write anything that I want, and that is now published. This is now the new age of publishing, the blogging and all those things that we talk about. Hardly any censorship, and I'm against censorship either, because I believe that the press should only be self-regulated. It can never be regulated from outside. It should always be self-regulated, and we are well regulated, there is no doubt about it. Our systems are pretty well regulated and controlled, but then the social media now makes a lot of pressure on you. I understand that you are all from the mainline media, but you must also understand one thing. The traditional mainline media still achieves the kind of confidence of people which the social media cannot. It can never be achieved through the social media. When you report to the papers and when you disclose it in the televisions, only thing I do, and a person like me I do, is I verify whether this is reported in two different papers also. If it is so, it must be a genuine news. But then in a social media, you have no idea, because they are not controlled by anything other than self-regulation, and many of them don't understand that meaning at all. There is many of the people whom I have seen in the social media, I get all these forwards that I get about myself, about others, and I understand how unregulated the social media still continues to be. I'm not saying that there should be external regulation. I am not a votary of external regulation. I have said so in one of my orders where I spoke about this in the open court. It's an order that was delivered in a pending matter. I said there cannot be a case of external regulation. It can only be a self-regulation. But I'm pleased, I am proud, and I commend you that the Indian media has been one of the best self-regulated systems I have seen. There is no doubt about it, and you can be proud of it. Whatever the international media may say about us, the Indian media is the best self-regulated media. It is one of the finest standards that we have. The ethical standards are high. Our reporters are one of the finest from the ground. Our editorial teams are one of the most neutral, unbiased that we can find. Of course, philosophies change. There may be interventions when philosophies will have to be taken note of. But then, that is inevitable. This is something that is part of the progress. It is something that is part of the growth. And I welcome it as a part of growth, as a part of evolution. Because we are not talking about a utopian system. Because this is also an attitude that can be, that can be blamed against judiciary or the executive. We have our own philosophies. So the extent to which you can self-regulate, we can understand that we are now voicing the voice of the people. It is a popular sovereign that is controlling us. Then that makes a large amount of difference. It can bring a complete change in the way we look at our society. Just before I part, when I talked about policing and all those factors, I was trying to reiterate that it is the people who are the masters and not the other way around. This is something I think our polity has forgotten. We call an officer sir only because we respect the position that the state, that the constitution gives us. That's a power that we draw from the constitution. Every officer, every judge, every other executive, the part of the executive, draws the trust of the people to do what he is expected to do. And this is a master, the concept of master, the people being the master. That is the most vital in every democracy. And I notice from the very proactive reports that I see these days that the press is also now emphasizing that. I am absolutely glad. People like Prasad, whom I will be honoring today, and it's my great pleasure. They're all reporters who do this, it's called the investigative journalism. Please understand, it is one of the most difficult things that you can do. I know how difficult it is for them to go to the ground level and understand things and then report. And how difficult and how tenuous their job is, because you develop a story. It takes a lot of time, effort and energy to develop a story slowly. And you develop it from the first brick, build it brick by brick by brick by brick, and come to a situation you might possibly think there is no story at all. The whole thing will have to be thrown away. It is only some of those stories which finally develop into something that can be presented before the people, that come across as the investigative journalistic pieces. The rest of it simply vanishes. Nobody knows. And their energy, their time that they spend on it, the amount of commitment that they have on it is possibly unseen. This is the importance and the beauty of investigative journalism. And this is what we tap. You hear in these papers that judges have taken suo motu and all that. It is not really suo motu. We are listening to the voice of the people. You reflect the voice of the people. You tell us that something like this is happening here. I hear it as a judge, not as a common man. I certainly would have read it as a common man. But then when I hear it as a judge, this is not really my duty when I am expected to discharge a constitutional obligation, particularly when I have large powers given to me under the Constitution. Article 226, unlimited powers. Am I not expected to listen to the voice of the people? I am expected to. And if it is within my power to do something about it, whatever be the manner, whatever be the modus that I may adopt, if I fail as a judge, I fail as a constitutional functionary. It is a voice of the people that I am looking for. It is a voice of the people that you people tell me, the press tells me. And it is that voice that is taken seriously. Nobody can take that voice lightly. It is that voice which will either make or destroy any institution of this country. And it is that voice that I am open with my eyes to hear every day. I'm sorry to hear every day, every moment. Though I don't read papers on a regular basis, I have sources of information also coming in. So in a very, very small manner, in a very short expanse, I'm just telling you how important you are. I believe that you understand you're important, but I'm just restating what you want to hear. And I believe that our future forward would depend upon the fourth pillar of the stool that I was talking about, the press. The more independent you are, the more vibrant India will be. The more fearless you are, the more powerful India will be. And the more rational you are, the more vibrant and powerful India will be. This is what I'm calling to the press. And I stop by saying that I have no complaints. I've already been restated. Our press has done a commendable job, but then there is certainly room for improvement. I hope you will do it, and I'm sure you will do it. I have great faith, and I'm a complete optimist. I am certain that as long as you perform your duties in the manner that you are doing today, India certainly would be having its pride of place in the community of nations. Thank you very much. And as a pure matter of formality, I inaugurate the lecture sessions that you will have. I know that perhaps this has not been a very inspiring or anything opening, but I hope you will have speakers and thinkers who will really spur you to further action. And I look forward to that, because finally, it is thoughts that make a man. That is gender neutral, it makes a woman also. So it's thoughts that make a woman or a man, and it is the thoughts that the press have a duty to pursue. Thank you so very much, and Godspeed to all of you. And I know that in an August gathering, and amongst the pioneers of the movement of press clubs in India, one of the largest press clubs in Kerala, and it is my great pleasure and privilege to have been called here and to be invited here. And I thank every one of you, including the small child whom I disturbed. Thank you so much.